Story number 1. Silent Snowfall, The Curse of Novaya Zemlya. Winter in Siberia is a force that demands respect. The vast expanse of snow-covered plains stretches endlessly, the horizon blurred where the sky meets the frozen earth. In 1897, my journey to the remote village of Novaya Zemlya was driven by a mix of curiosity and duty. As a young ethnographer, I was tasked with documenting the lives of Siberia's secluded communities, preserving their stories before modernization erased them forever. Little did I know, the story of Novaya Zemlya would become one of the darkest chapters in my life. I arrived in Novaya Zemlya in early December, the air already biting with the onset of winter. The village was a small cluster of wooden huts, their roofs heavy with fresh snow, nestled amidst dense pine forests. The villagers greeted me with a mix of suspicion and curiosity, their eyes reflecting the harshness of their environment. They were hardy people, accustomed to the relentless cold and the isolation that the Siberian wilderness imposed. During my first few weeks, I immersed myself in their daily routines, listening to their tales around the communal fire. They spoke of survival, of battling the elements, and of the deep-rooted superstitions that governed their lives. One story, however, stood out among the rest, a tale of an elderly woman named Yelena, who had been exiled from the village years prior. Yelena was considered a witch by many, accused of dark magic and unnatural deeds. The reasons for her exile were murky, shrouded in whispers and fear. Some claimed she could control the weather. Others believed she communed with spirits from beyond. Regardless of the truth, her departure left a void, and her absence was felt deeply by the villagers. As winter tightened its grip, the first signs of the curse began to emerge. The nights grew longer, the storms more violent, and the snow fell with a vengeance that seemed almost sentient. One particularly harsh storm descended upon Novaya Zemlya in late December, enveloping the village in a blinding whiteout. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie silence that was both beautiful and terrifying. I stayed in the village during the storm, the power lines down and the roads impassable. Inside the communal hut, we huddled together, the fire barely keeping the cold at bay. The villagers whispered prayers and performed age-old rituals, hoping to appease whatever wrath the storm had brought upon them. Amidst the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent was at work, something beyond the natural fury of the storm. The storm raged for 3 days and nights, each passing moment more harrowing than the last. On the third night, as the wind reached its peak, the ground began to tremble beneath our feet. The snow piled higher, burying huts and trees alike, until the village was swallowed by a relentless avalanche of white. Panic erupted as villagers scrambled to find shelter. But the storm's ferocity left little room for escape. When the storm finally subsided, a heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant creak of settling snow. We emerged from our shelters to a scene of utter devastation. The village of Novaya Zemlya was no more, completely buried under meters of snow and ice. It was as if the earth had reclaimed the land, erasing any trace of human presence. In the days that followed, I sought answers. Conversations with the surviving villagers revealed a chilling connection to Yelena's exile. They believed her curse had been triggered by their fear and rejection, condemning the village to a fate of perpetual winter and eventual disappearance. Skeptical yet unnerved, I began to investigate the circumstances surrounding the storm and the village's sudden vanishing. Delving into old records and speaking with the elders, I uncovered fragments of Yelena's story. She had lived alone on the outskirts of the village, her hut a place of solitude and mystery. Some spoke of seeing strange lights emanating from her home during storms, others of hearing her chants carried by the wind. It became clear that Yelena was more than just a scapegoat for the villagers' fears. She was a pivotal figure in their lives, intertwined with the very essence of the village's survival. Determined to understand the true nature of the curse, I returned to the site of Novaya Zemlya the following winter, armed with equipment to probe beneath the snow. The landscape was eerily calm, the snow untouched since the storm that had obliterated the village. As I began my excavation, the cold seeped into my bones, the isolation pressing down on me with every passing hour. Days turned into weeks, each moment filled with a haunting silence and the relentless biting cold. One night, as I worked under the pale light of a full moon, I heard it, the faintest whisper carried by the wind. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of the frigid air. But the whisper grew clearer, forming words that sent shivers down my spine. "Find her!" I froze, the whisper echoing in the vast expanse around me. Gathering my courage, I followed the sound, the snow crunching beneath my boots as I ventured deeper into the heart of the buried village. The ground beneath me felt different, almost pulsating with an unseen energy that seemed to guide me towards Yelena's hut. As I approached the remnants of her home, the air grew colder, the silence more oppressive. The remnants of the hut were now mere outlines beneath the snow, but something beckoned me forward. I began to dig, my hands numb and trembling, until I uncovered the buried entrance to the basement. Descending into the darkness, I felt a presence, a cold, sorrowful energy that weighed heavily on my spirit. The basement was frozen, the walls encrusted with ice that shimmered under my lantern's weak light. In the center stood an altar, its surface covered in ancient symbols and offerings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. A chill ran through me as I realized the extent of Yelena's influence. The altar was the source of the curse, a conduit through which her anger and sorrow had manifested, bringing perpetual winter and obliterating the village. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something else, something darker and more unsettling. As I examined the altar, the temperature plummeted further, my breath forming visible puffs in the frigid air. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more urgent. "Release me!" I understood then that Yelena's spirit was trapped, bound to the altar by the villagers' fear and rejection. To lift the curse, I had to free her, to break the bonds that held her in eternal torment. Trembling, I began to dismantle the symbols, each removal weakening the altar's hold on the land. But with each broken symbol, the presence of Yelena's spirit intensified, her sorrow and rage coalescing into a palpable force that threatened to consume me. The basement seemed to close in, the walls pulsating with dark energy as I fought against the oppressive weight of her curse. With a final, desperate effort, I shattered the last symbol, the altar cracking under the strain of my actions. A blinding light filled the room, and I felt a surge of energy that pushed me back. The force of the curse finally beginning to break. The whispers transformed into cries of relief and sorrow, a haunting melody that filled the basement as Yelena's spirit was finally set free. The light faded, leaving behind a profound silence and a sense of peace that had eluded the village for decades. I ascended from the basement, the snow around me beginning to melt as the curse lifted, revealing the landscape in a new light. The perpetual winter that had claimed Novaya Zemlya was no more, the land thawing under the warmth of newfound freedom. Returning to the remnants of the village, I felt a sense of accomplishment tempered by the haunting memories of Yelena's sorrow. The curse had been broken, but the cost was high. A village lost to time and a spirit finally at peace. As I documented my findings, I couldn't help but reflect on the power of fear and the consequences of rejection. The lessons of Novaya Zemlya etched into my soul forever. Years later, the story of Novaya Zemlya serves as a cautionary tale among those who venture into the Siberian wilderness. The memory of Yelena's curse lingers, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural forces that dwell in the shadows of nature's most unforgiving landscapes. My experiences have made me a firm believer in the importance of understanding and respecting the beliefs and traditions of the communities we study, lest we awaken forces beyond our comprehension. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the pines and the snow begins to fall, I find myself yearning for the quiet solitude of Novaya Zemlya, the memory of Yelena's sorrow a silent whisper in the cold air. It's a haunting reminder that some curses are born from the depths of human fear, and that the spirits we wrongfully reject can leave a mark that lasts far beyond our mortal lives. If you ever find yourself traversing the remote wilderness of Siberia, heed the stories of Novaya Zemlya and the spirit of Yelena. Respect the land and its inhabitants. For some curses are not just legends but powerful forces that can alter the very fabric of reality. And remember, in the vast expanse of snow and silence, you are never truly alone. Story number 2. The Curse of Frost Peak Hill. Winter in Vermont was always unforgiving, but Frost Peak Hill stood as the epitome of nature's relentless grip. In 1923, my wife, Eleanor, and our 2 children, Anna and Michael, decided to leave behind the bustling city life for the serene isolation of this remote hilltop. The decision was fueled by a desire for tranquility and the promise of fresh air. Away from the clamor that had frayed our nerves over the past few years, our new home was a modest wooden cabin, nestled among towering pines and blanketed by thick snow that seemed to cling to every branch and roof. The locals had warned us about Frost Peak Hill, sharing tales of a wanderer named Viktor Ivanov who had met a tragic end there many years before. According to village lore, Viktor was a solitary man, often seen trekking the hill during winter storms. One fateful night, a severe blizzard struck, and Viktor vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but eerie silence and whispered curses. We dismissed these stories as mere folklore, remnants of a bygone era that had lost their relevance in the modern world. Yet, as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, an unsettling feeling began to settle over our family. The wind seemed to carry voices from the past, and shadows danced menacingly among the trees. It was Christmas Eve, December 24th, when the true horror unfolded. The storm that had been brewing for days finally broke, unleashing a fury of wind and snow that howled through the night. Eleanor and I were inside the cabin, trying to keep our children warm by the fireplace, while Anna and Michael played quietly in their rooms. The power lines were down, and the darkness outside was complete, save for the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the desolate landscape. Around midnight, a piercing scream shattered the fragile peace of our home. Anna, startled from her sleep, rushed to our room, her face pale and wide-eyed. "Daddy, Mommy, I heard someone crying out there," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Eleanor grabbed a lantern, her expression stern yet worried. "Stay here, Anna. We'll go check it out." We stepped outside into the storm, the cold biting at our skin, making each breath visible in the frigid air. The snow swirled around us, reducing visibility to mere feet. Following the sound of distant crying, we trudged through the thick snow, our lantern casting long, wavering shadows on the ground. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the edge of the forest, where the trees loomed like silent sentinels. There, amidst the swirling snow, stood a figure, a woman dressed in tattered clothing, her face obscured by the hood of her shawl. She appeared to be in distress, her hands raised towards the heavens as if pleading for help. "Are you all right?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the cold night air. Before we could respond, the figure began to fade, her form dissolving into the swirling snowflakes. Confused and unnerved, we watched as she disappeared, leaving behind only the sound of the storm and the lingering sense of dread. "We need to go back," Eleanor urged, her voice shaky. "This place gives me the creeps." As we turned to leave, I noticed a set of footprints leading away from where the woman had stood, deep impressions in the fresh snow that seemed to head towards the dense forest. "Look at these," I pointed out, kneeling to inspect them. "They're fresh. Someone or something has been here recently." Before we could make sense of it, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. Panic set in as we realized we were disoriented, the path back obscured by the relentless snow. The footprints seemed to guide us deeper into the forest, away from the safety of our cabin. Hours passed in a blur of white, the storm showing no signs of relenting. The footprints led us to a small clearing where the snow was undisturbed, save for a single lantern lying on the ground. This flickering light cast eerie shadows, revealing an old, weathered diary partially buried in the snow. Eleanor picked it up, brushing off the layers of ice. "It's Victor's," she said, her voice filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. "His diary." We sat down in the clearing, the storm gradually subsiding as dawn approached. As I opened the diary, I began to read the entries that detailed Victor's descent into madness, his obsession with uncovering the hill's secrets, and his eventual disappearance during a similar storm. December 15th, 1919. The whispers began last night, voices carried by the wind, calling my name, urging me to explore deeper into the hill. I feel an unseen force pulling me, driving me to uncover the truth that lies beneath the snow. December 20th, 1919. I have found it, a hidden chamber beneath Frost Peak. The air is thick with sorrow, and the walls are adorned with symbols that glow faintly in the dark. I can hear their cries, the voices of those who have been lost to the hill. I must free them, to bring peace to this cursed place. December 25th, 1919. It's Christmas night, and the storm rages outside, mirroring the turmoil within. The chamber is alive with shadows, dancing to the mournful tune of the hill. I fear I cannot leave, that I am bound here forever, just as they are. December 26th, 1919. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The voices are relentless, their grief consuming me. If anyone finds this diary, beware the curse of Frost Peak Hill. Do not follow the voices, for they will lead you to your doom. A chill ran down my spine as I finished reading, the weight of Victor's words sinking in. Eleanor looked up, her eyes filled with fear. "We need to leave this place now. It's cursed." As we made our way back to the cabin, the forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows lengthening and twisting into ominous shapes. The footprints that had led us into the heart of the hill now seemed to pull us further away, deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, Anna and Michael appeared before us, their faces pale and eyes vacant. We heard the voices. Anna whispered, her voice hollow. They told us to follow. Eleanor grabbed their hands, pulling them away from the shadowy figures that emerged from the trees. "Come on, we have to go," she urged, her voice trembling. But as we turned to flee, the ground beneath us began to tremble, the snow swirling into a vortex that seemed to consume everything in its path. The shadows reached out, their forms merging into the shape of Victor, his eyes filled with eternal sorrow. "Do not fear," his voice echoed, "but do not stay. Leave now, or be lost forever." With a surge of adrenaline, we sprinted towards the cabin, the storm now a full-blown tempest that threatened to swallow us whole. The footprints that had once guided us were now a path of no return, the voices urging us to abandon our quest for peace. We reached the cabin just as the storm began to abate, the snow piling high around us, sealing us inside. Exhausted and terrified, we huddled together, the haunting presence of Frost Peak Hill lingering in our minds. The next morning, the snow had settled into a quiet stillness, the hill once again appearing peaceful and serene. Yet, when we attempted to leave, the cabin seemed to have vanished, replaced by an empty expanse of snow and pine. Desperation set in as we realized we were trapped, the hill refusing to release its hold on us. Days turned into weeks, our isolation weighed down by fear and the unending winter. Our belongings were neatly arranged inside the empty cabin, every item in its place despite our frantic attempts to escape. It was as if the hill had erased our existence, leaving behind only the memories of our torment. We never found a way out, our fate sealed by the curse of Frost Peak Hill. Locals who ventured near the area spoke of seeing shadows dancing in the snow, hearing the faint cries of lost souls carried by the wind. The story of our disappearance became another chapter in the village's grim folklore, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurk in the heart of the frozen wilderness. Years later, I hear the whispers still, soft calls carried by the wind, urging travelers to heed the warnings and respect the ancient curses that bind the land. The memory of that cursed winter remains a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural forces that seek to protect their secrets at any cost. If you ever find yourself drawn to the remote hills of Vermont during the dead of winter, remember the story of Frost Peak Hill and the curse that claims those who dare to challenge its wrath. Respect the land, honor its history, and beware the voices that call from the snow. For some curses are not easily broken, and some hills are better left untouched. Story number 3. Frozen Echoes. Winter in Michigan was always harsh, but the deep chill that settled over Lake Seraphine in 1944 felt different, unnaturally oppressive, as if the very air was thick with foreboding. Nestled in a secluded valley, the lake was a picturesque expanse of ice, surrounded by dense forests that stood silent and watchful. To the townsfolk of Pinewood, Lake Seraphine was both a haven and a curse, a place where beauty and terror intertwined beneath the frozen surface. I remember the first time I heard the stories. It was a bitterly cold December evening, the kind that seeped into your bones and made even the simplest tasks feel monumental. My father, a lifelong fisherman, sat me down by the fireplace, his weathered face etched with lines of worry and exhaustion. "Son," he began, his voice heavy with a mix of fear and resignation. "There's something about that lake. Every winter, people go out there fishing, skating, and they never come back. When the ice melts, their bodies are found, frozen with eyes wide open, staring into nothingness." I was 12 then, naive and curious, but his words planted a seed of unease that would grow over the years. Pinewood was a small town, the kind where everyone knew each other's business and secrets were hard to keep. The legends of Lake Seraphine were whispered with a mix of fear and reverence, especially as winter approached. By the time I was 18, I had become fascinated with the lake's dark reputation. I spent countless hours wandering its icy shores, captivated by the eerie stillness and the way the snow seemed to blanket every sound, muffling the world into a hushed silence. There was something magnetic about Lake Seraphine, a pull that drew me closer even as a part of me screamed to stay away. One particularly frigid January night, under a sky blanketed with stars and the moon casting a ghostly glow over the frozen landscape, I decided to uncover the truth behind the lake's curse. Armed with a sturdy pair of ice skates, a lantern, and a notebook to document my findings, I ventured out alone, driven by a need to understand the inexplicable disappearances that had plagued Pinewood for generations. The path to the lake was treacherous, the snow deep and unyielding beneath my boots. The forests around me were silent, the only sounds the crunch of snow and the distant howl of the wind. As I approached the lake, the full moon illuminated the vast expanse of ice, revealing intricate patterns etched by the freezing temperatures. The water beneath was dark and still, a deceptive calm that belied the danger lurking just beneath the surface. I set up a small camp near the shoreline, the lantern casting long, wavering shadows across the snow. The air was biting cold, each breath a visible puff that dissipated into the night. I strapped on my skates, the blades cutting cleanly into the ice, and began to glide across the frozen surface. The sensation was liberating, the smooth glide over the ice a stark contrast to the tension coiling within me. Hours passed as I skated, the monotony of the night broken only by the occasional flicker of the lantern and the distant sounds of the forest. Just as fatigue began to set in, a strange phenomenon caught my attention, a faint, pulsating light emanating from the center of the lake. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable against the moonlight, but gradually it grew brighter, more defined. Curiosity overcame caution, and I found myself drawn towards the source of the light. As I approached, the air seemed to grow colder, the very atmosphere thickening with an unnatural stillness. The ice beneath me felt different here, the texture shifting as if responding to an unseen force. The light now pulsed with a rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat, beckoning me closer. Standing at the edge of the glowing patch, I peered into the water, the ice shimmering with an ethereal glow. The sight that met my eyes was both mesmerizing and terrifying. A figure, translucent and ghostly, standing beneath the surface. It was a woman, her form barely discernible, yet her presence was undeniably human. Her eyes were wide open, staring into the abyss, filled with a silent, unending sorrow. Before I could react, a chilling whisper echoed across the lake. Carried by the wind, "Help us." It beckoned, a plea that resonated deep within my soul. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to make sense of the apparition before me. Was it a hallucination brought on by isolation and cold? Or something far more sinister? Determined to find answers, I reached out towards the figure, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the icy surface. Instantly, the air around me seemed to crackle with energy, the temperature plummeting further as the figure began to ascend. Her expression remained one of profound sadness, her eyes never leaving mine as she floated upwards, breaking through the ice with a grace that defied reality. "Why are you here?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the storm that had begun to brew on the horizon. She didn't respond with words, but her eyes conveyed a desperate need, a yearning for release from whatever bound her to the lake. The realization hit me hard. These were the souls of those who had vanished, trapped in an eternal winter of their own making. The lake wasn't just a place of recreation. It was a prison, a purgatory for the lost and forgotten. As she continued to rise, the ice beneath me began to shimmer and shift, revealing hidden pathways and ancient symbols etched into the frozen ground. The whispers grew louder, the voices of the lost intertwining with the howling wind, creating a symphony of sorrow that echoed across the desolate landscape. Fear and empathy warred within me, but a sense of duty propelled me forward. I knew I had to help these tormented souls find peace, to break the curse that held them captive. Taking a deep breath, I reached out, placing my hand gently on the ice beside the figure. The moment my skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through me, the symbols and pathways coming to life under my touch. Visions flooded my mind, images of the past, of the woman who had been exiled, her desperate attempts to save the village from its own darkness, and the tragic night when the storm had claimed her and countless others. The whispers became clearer, guiding me towards a forgotten ritual, a means to lift the curse and set the souls free. Following the visions, I retraced my steps across the lake, the figure watching me with a silent plea. The ice beneath me felt less solid, more fluid, as if responding to my determination. As I reached the designated spot, the symbols glowed brightly, their ancient power resonating with my resolve. I began to chant the words that had echoed in my mind, a language long forgotten but now etched into my very being. The air around me vibrated with energy, the storm intensifying as the ritual took hold. The figure started to fade, her form becoming less distinct as the curse began to break. A brilliant light enveloped the lake, the ice cracking and shattering under the force of the ritual. The winds howled in protest, the storm raging with a newfound intensity. Yet there was a sense of release, a weight lifting from the desolate landscape. The voices of the lost grew fainter, their sorrowful cries turning into whispers of gratitude as the curse was finally lifted. As the light faded and the storm subsided, the lake returned to its serene state, the ice once again calm and still. The figure was gone, her presence replaced by a profound sense of peace that settled over the lake. Exhausted but fulfilled, I stood alone on the frozen shore, the memories of that night etched into my soul forever. Returning to Pinewood, I shared my story with the townsfolk, the tale of redemption and the power of compassion resonating deeply within our community. The curse of Lake Seraphine was lifted, the spirits of the lost finally finding the peace they had long been denied. The lake remained a place of beauty, its dark history now a reminder of the thin line between fear and understanding. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory of Lake Seraphine remains a haunting reminder of the power of the human spirit to confront the unknown and bring light to even the darkest of curses. Eleanor and I grew old together, our bond strengthened by the shared experience, our lives forever intertwined with the frozen echoes of the past. Sometimes, on particularly quiet winter nights, I find myself gazing out over Lake Seraphine, the moonlight casting a gentle glow on the still waters. The whispers of the lost no longer haunt the air, replaced by the serene silence of a lake that has finally found peace. It's a comforting thought, a testament to the enduring power of love, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of truth. If you ever find yourself near Lake Seraphine during the dead of winter, remember the story of the lost and the power of compassion to break even the most enduring of curses. Respect the spirits that linger, honor their stories, and cherish the peace that comes from understanding and forgiveness. For in the heart of the frozen landscape, beneath the silent snow, lies a tale of redemption that echoes through the ages, a reminder that even in the darkest of winters, hope can prevail. Story number 4. The Snowman Man. Winter in Alaska is a time when the landscape transforms into an unforgiving expanse of white, each snowflake adding to the silent, oppressive blanket that smothers the land. In 1976, I joined a group of seasoned hunters for what was supposed to be a routine expedition deep into the heart of the wilderness. Little did I know, our journey would lead us into a nightmare woven from the icy threads of ancient curses and unrelenting fear. I'm Jack Reynolds, an avid outdoorsman with a deep respect for the untamed beauty of Alaska. Our group consisted of 5 men, each bringing their own expertise to the table. Tom, the experienced tracker; Mike, the pragmatic survivalist; Sam, the quiet observer with a knack for storytelling; and Rick, the youngest and most enthusiastic among us. Together, we ventured into the remote areas of the Denali National Park, seeking the thrill of the hunt and the solace of nature's solitude. The first few days were everything we had hoped for. We navigated through dense forests, crossed frozen rivers, and set up camp under a sky so clear it seemed to stretch into infinity. The nights were long and cold, the only sounds being the crackling of our campfire and the distant howls of wolves that echoed through the silent woods. It was during one such night, on the 4th day of our expedition, that we stumbled upon something that would forever alter our lives. We had set out early in the morning, the sun barely cresting the horizon, casting long shadows across the snowy terrain. Tom was leading the way, his sharp eyes scanning the ground for any signs of game. As midday approached, we reached a vast, open field surrounded by towering pines. The ground was pristine, untouched by our passage, and in the center stood a peculiar sight, a perfectly crafted snowman, far too intricate to be the work of chance or a novice snow sculptor. The snowman was unlike any we had seen before. It stood at least 6 feet tall, with meticulously carved features that gave it an eerie semblance to a human. Its eyes were 2 dark stones that seemed to follow us as we moved, and its mouth was a thin line of coal, fixed in a perpetual, unsettling smile. The snowman wore what appeared to be remnants of old clothing, faded buttons on a makeshift jacket and a tattered scarf wrapped tightly around its neck. Sam, always the one to find wonder in the mundane, was the first to approach. "Looks like someone took their time with this," he remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Probably a local kid, right?" Rick, eager to explore, reached out to touch the snowman. "Hey, let's see if it's still cold," he suggested, extending his hand towards the figure. Before any of us could stop him, his fingers made contact with the icy surface. The moment his skin met the snow, an unsettling chill swept through the field, more intense than the biting cold that already enveloped us. Rick recoiled, his eyes wide with fear. "Did you guys feel that?" Tom, ever the rational one, shook his head. Probably just the wind playing tricks on us. Nothing to worry about. But unease lingered in the air, a silent tension that crept into our bones. We decided to leave the snowman behind, dismissing it as a harmless curiosity. Little did we know, our actions had set into motion a series of events that would unravel our sanity and test the very limits of our survival. That night, as we sat around the campfire, the memories of the snowman began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of our isolation. The wind howled louder than usual, and the trees seemed to sway with a life of their own, casting distorted shadows that danced menacingly in the flickering firelight. It was during this restless night that Tom disappeared. We noticed his absence first when the morning chill set in, the sun's weak rays struggling to penetrate the thick blanket of snow. His tent was empty, his gear untouched. Panic surged through us as we realized he was gone without a trace. We searched the surrounding area, calling out his name, but the vast expanse of wilderness offered no clues. Days turned into weeks, and more of our group began to vanish. Mike was the next to disappear, followed by Sam and Rick, each gone without a trace, leaving behind only their abandoned gear and the lingering fear that something malevolent was at work. The once tight-knit group was now reduced to me, alone and desperate in a land that seemed determined to swallow me whole. In the aftermath of their disappearances, I delved into the local legends, seeking answers to the horrors that had befallen us. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about Frost Peak Hill, an ancient site believed to be cursed by a tribe that had long since vanished. According to the tales, a shaman named Eerie had harnessed dark powers to protect his people from outsiders. But the curse had backfired, binding the spirits of the tribe to the land in eternal torment. As I pieced together the fragments of our ordeal, the connection between the snowman and the curse became undeniable. The intricate design of the snowman mirrored the symbols described in the legends, suggesting that it was more than just a child's plaything. It was a manifestation of the curse, a beacon that drew the spirit's wrath upon those who disturbed it. Determined to break the cycle of fear and tragedy, I set out to confront the curse head-on. Armed with the knowledge gleaned from the legends and the resolve to survive, I ventured deeper into Frost Peak Hill, the heart of the curse that had claimed my friends and nearly consumed me. The journey was fraught with peril, the landscape shifting unpredictably under the weight of the curse's malevolent influence. Nights were the worst, the darkness alive with whispers and shadows that seemed to reach out to me, urging me to turn back. But I pressed on, driven by the memory of my lost friends and the hope of ending the curse that had torn our lives apart. It was during one particularly brutal blizzard that I found the source of the curse, a hidden chamber carved into the very bedrock of the hill, adorned with the same intricate symbols as the snowman. Inside the chamber, I discovered remnants of ancient rituals, burnt offerings, faded totems, and a central altar that pulsed with dark energy. It was here that Eerie had performed his forbidden rites, binding the spirits of his tribe to the land in a desperate bid for protection. The altar served as the anchor, the focal point of the curse that ensnared all who dared to disturb the sacred ground. Realizing that the only way to break the curse was to destroy the altar, I steeled myself for the task ahead. Armed with the tools I had brought and a heart full of determination, I began the ritual of destruction, the symbols resonating with a dark power that fought against my efforts. The chamber trembled, the air thick with the cries of the bound spirits, their anguish echoing through the cavernous space. As I worked to dismantle the altar, the spirits' resistance grew fiercer, their spectral forms materializing around me in a desperate bid to halt my progress. The cold was unbearable, each breath a battle against the freezing air that sought to consume me. But I pushed forward, driven by the need to free the tormented souls and lay their suffering to rest. With a final, resounding blow, I shattered the central symbol, the altar collapsing under the weight of its own dark power. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the spirits let out a collective sigh of relief as the curse began to unravel. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a warmth that seeped into my bones. The air now free of the malevolent energy that had haunted Frost Peak Hill for so long. Emerging from the chamber, I found the snow-covered landscape transformed. The curse lifted and the land at peace once more. The storm had abated, the sky clearing to reveal a sky streaked with the colors of dawn. As I made my way back to our original campsite, the memory of my friends began to fade, their spirits finally finding the peace they had long been denied. Returning to Pinewood, I shared my story with the townsfolk, the tale of Frost Peak Hill and the curse that had claimed so many lives, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers that lie in tampering with forces beyond our understanding. The snowman, once a symbol of innocence and play, had become a testament to the dark power of ancient curses and the fragile line between curiosity and catastrophe. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory of Frost Peak Hill remains etched in my mind. A haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural forces that dwell in the frozen wilderness. The legends of the cursed hill continue to be whispered among the townsfolk, a cautionary tale of the perils of disrespecting ancient traditions and the consequences of awakening dormant curses. Sometimes, when the snow begins to fall and the wind whispers through the pines, I find myself gazing towards Frost Peak Hill, the memory of the curse and the snowman lingering like a ghostly echo. It's a reminder that some places hold secrets that are better left undisturbed, their mysteries forever buried beneath layers of snow and shadow. If you ever find yourself venturing into the remote hills of Vermont during the dead of winter, heed the warnings of those who have walked the cursed paths before you. Respect the land, honor its history, and beware the silent watchers that dwell in the snow. For some curses are not merely stories but powerful forces that can alter the very fabric of reality, leaving nothing but despair and loss in their wake. Story number 5. Eternal Winter, the Curse of Frosthaven House. Winter in Colorado has always been a formidable presence, but Frosthaven House stood as a chilling testament to nature's unyielding grip. Nestled on a secluded mountain ridge, the house had been abandoned for decades, its windows darkened by grime and its wooden facade weathered by countless storms. Locals whispered tales of curses and restless spirits, warnings etched into the collective memory of the nearby town of Silverpine. In 1958, driven by a mix of curiosity and skepticism, my family and I decided to challenge the legends that had long deterred others from venturing into the cursed abode. I'm Thomas Caldwell, a writer with a penchant for uncovering the truth behind old myths. My wife, Margaret, a historian, shared my fascination, while our 2 children, Emily and Jack, brought a youthful energy to our expedition. We purchased Frosthaven House with the intention of restoring it, believing that the stories were mere fabrications born from superstition and isolation. The first few weeks were idyllic. We spent our days clearing the overgrown gardens, repairing broken windows, and restoring the interior to its former glory. The house, though dilapidated, held a certain charm that spoke of a bygone era. Margaret delved into the town archives, uncovering snippets of Frosthaven's history and the tragic tale of its last resident, Eleanor Frost. Eleanor was a reclusive woman, known for her knowledge of herbal remedies and her deep connection to the land. However, rumors of witchcraft and dark rituals began to circulate after a series of unexplained disappearances plagued Silverpine. Eleanor was blamed for these tragedies, leading to her exile and the subsequent abandonment of Frosthaven House. Before her departure, it was said that she cursed the house, declaring that anyone who dared to reside there would never witness the warmth of spring again. As winter approached, an uneasy tension settled over our household. Margaret found Eleanor's journal hidden beneath a floorboard, its pages filled with cryptic entries and ominous warnings. One passage stood out: "The winter's embrace shall be eternal, and those who dwell within these walls shall be lost to the frost." We dismissed it as poetic exaggeration, but the atmosphere around us grew increasingly oppressive. The first sign of the curse manifested on a particularly frigid December night. A fierce snowstorm descended upon Frosthaven, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls and the roof groaning under the weight of the accumulating snow. We huddled together by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The power lines were down, plunging us into darkness save for the flickering light of candles and the storm's relentless fury. As the storm raged on, an eerie silence enveloped the house, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant howl of the wind. It was during this tumultuous night that Emily went missing. She had been playing quietly in her room, but when we searched for her, she was nowhere to be found. Her bed was neatly made, and her toys were untouched, leaving us with a gnawing sense of dread. Days turned into weeks, and the snow showed no signs of relenting. The once vibrant atmosphere of our home had transformed into a prison of ice and despair. Margaret's research deepened, revealing that Eleanor's curse was more than just a threat. It was a binding spell that manipulated the very fabric of time and space within Frosthaven. Each winter, the curse would tighten its grip, preventing the thaw of spring and ensuring the eternal winter's hold. Determined to save our family, we delved into the rituals Eleanor had performed, hoping to find a way to break the curse. Her journal hinted at a counter-ritual, one that required a profound sacrifice and a deep understanding of the land's ancient magic. As the second winter set in, the atmosphere grew colder, the days shorter, and our hope dwindled. One stormy night, the culmination of our efforts approached. The wind outside reached a deafening roar, and the house seemed to come alive with spectral apparitions, ghostly figures that wandered the halls, their hollow eyes filled with sorrow and anger. Margaret and I stood in the center of the living room, the remnants of Eleanor's rituals scattered before us. Emily's presence lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the stakes we faced. With trembling hands, I began the incantation, my voice wavering as the cold seeped into my bones. Margaret followed suit, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume her. The air around us crackled with energy, the symbols on the floor glowing with an ethereal light. The spectral apparitions closed in, their whispers growing louder, begging us to abandon our efforts. But we pressed on, driven by desperation and love for our missing child. As we reached the final words of the counter-ritual, a blinding light enveloped the room, and the oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a warmth that felt almost foreign. The spectral figures let out a collective sigh, their forms dissolving into the light as the curse began to break. In that moment of triumph, a figure emerged from the light, Eleanor Frost herself, her presence both commanding and sorrowful. "You have lifted the curse," she intoned, her voice echoing through the now tranquil house. "But the price of redemption is great. One must leave to restore the balance that has been disrupted." Before we could respond, the room began to shake, the house responding to her final command. Margaret, realizing the necessity, nodded solemnly. "We understand," she whispered, turning to gather our belongings. As we stepped outside, the storm had miraculously subsided, the first hints of spring breaking through the eternal winter's hold. The snow melted around us, revealing the vibrant colors of budding trees and the promise of renewal. Emily stood before us, unharmed, her eyes filled with an otherworldly light and a sense of peace that had been absent for weeks. The house, once a symbol of our despair, now stood empty and serene, its curse lifted and its secrets finally at rest. We left Frosthaven Hill behind, the memory of the curse and the sacrifice we had made forever etched into our hearts. The legend of Frosthaven House became a tale of redemption and the enduring power of love. A story passed down through generations as a reminder of the thin line between hope and despair. Years later, I often find myself gazing back at the mountain where Frosthaven House once stood, now blooming with the colors of spring. The curse that had held the house in eternal winter was a haunting reminder of the past, a testament to the sacrifices made in the name of love and the lengths we would go to protect those we hold dear. If you ever find yourself near the secluded hills of Colorado during the dead of winter, Remember the story of Frosthaven House and the curse that nearly claimed us. Respect the legends that speak of ancient magic and the spirits that protect their sacred grounds. For some curses are born from deep-rooted sorrow and can only be lifted through profound sacrifice and unwavering love. In the quiet moments of reflection, I am grateful for the thaw that brought spring's promise back to our lives, and I hold dear the memory of my family's resilience in the face of darkness. Frosthaven House remains a silent sentinel on the mountain, its story a lingering whisper carried by the winds of Colorado's endless winters. Story number 6. Silent shadows on white plains. Winter in North Dakota is unforgiving. The cold seeps into your bones, and the endless expanse of white can drive a man to the brink of madness. In 1982, I joined a group of road construction workers tasked with building a new highway through White Plains. A desolate snowfield whispered about in town as cursed land. Skeptical of ghost stories and driven by the promise of steady work, I didn't believe the legends until the snow began to fall harder than usual. Our team was small but seasoned: Mike, the foreman with a stern exterior and a heart of gold; Linda, our surveyor, whose sharp eyes missed nothing; Tom and Jerry, the twins who handled the heavy machinery; and me, Jack, just another laborer trying to make ends meet. We set up camp near the edge of White Plains, the snow piling high around our makeshift tents, isolating us from the rest of the world. The first few days were routine, the monotony of drilling and laying asphalt broken only by the howling wind that seemed to have a mind of its own. But as the weeks dragged on, an uneasy tension settled over us. The snow never seemed to stop falling, each flake colder and heavier than the last, as if the sky itself was mourning. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, we gathered around the fire, the warmth a fragile barrier against the relentless cold. Mike shared tales of the land's dark history, stories of miners and settlers who had perished in sudden blizzards, their spirits said to wander White Plains, seeking vengeance for their untimely deaths. I laughed it off, clinking my mug against theirs, dismissing the stories as nothing more than local folklore. But that night, as the fire flickered and the shadows danced on our tents, the atmosphere changed. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackling of the flames and the distant roar of the storm. It was then that Linda spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you guys hear that?" We fell silent, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing but the wind, but gradually, faint whispers began to emerge, soft and indistinct, like voices carried by the breeze. They seemed to be calling our names, echoing through the vast emptiness of White Plains. Tom leaned closer to the fire, his eyes darting around nervously, probably just the wind playing tricks on us. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving through our thoughts like icy tendrils. I felt a chill run down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Mike stood abruptly, the wooden chair scraping against the ground. "All right, that's enough," he declared, trying to mask his unease. "We're not letting some ghost stories get the best of us. Let's get some rest." We tried to ignore the whispers, but sleep was elusive that night. Every creak of the tents and every gust of wind seemed amplified, the voices persistent and haunting. When morning finally broke, the snow had fallen even thicker, blanketing the world in oppressive silence. As we resumed our work, the tension among us was palpable. It wasn't long before the first incident occurred. Jerry was operating the snowplow, clearing a path through the drifts, when he suddenly stopped, his eyes wide with terror. "Guys, I saw something," he stammered, pointing towards the north side of the field. We followed his gaze, and there, amidst the swirling snow, stood a figure, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to flicker and wane with the storm's fury. For a moment, it appeared human, then dissolved into the white nothingness, leaving us staring into the void. Mike approached cautiously, his skepticism waning. "Probably another drift." "Jerry, don't know what you're seeing, but that night, the phenomena escalated." Tom went missing, vanished without a trace during a blizzard that hit with unprecedented ferocity. We searched the entire area, calling out his name, but the storm had swallowed him whole. Days later, his frozen body was found at the edge of White Plains, eyes wide open in eternal horror, as if he had seen something unspeakable. Fear began to gnaw at us, the legends of cursed land now too close to reality to dismiss. Another night, another whisper this time. Tom's voice seemed to beckon us, urging us to leave, to never return. One by one, our group began to experience the same haunting phenomena. Shadowy figures moving just out of sight, whispers calling our names, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Linda couldn't take it anymore. "I can't do this," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I need to go home." One by one, they left, driven away by the relentless torment that plagued White Plains. Mike, the last to stay, tried to keep morale high, but the shadows grew bolder, the whispers turning into cries of despair. It was clear that the spirits of White Plains were intent on claiming us, just as they had claimed so many before. I was the only one left, determined to uncover the truth behind the curse. Armed with Linda's journal and Mike's fading courage, I delved deeper into the heart of White Plains, seeking answers amidst the snow and shadows. The land seemed to resist, the snow shifting to block my path, the whispers now a chorus of sorrow and rage. In the dead of night, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin, its windows boarded up and the door hanging ajar. The air around it was thick with malevolent energy, the temperature dropping sharply as I approached. Inside, the remnants of a bygone era lay frozen in time, personal belongings scattered, the remnants of lives abruptly interrupted by the curse. On the main table, I found a diary belonging to Eleanor Frost, the last resident of the cabin before the curse took hold. Her entries detailed a life of isolation and fear, her descent into madness as the spirits of White Plains tormented her for her perceived sins. The final entry was a desperate plea. "If anyone finds this, beware the wrath of White Plains. The spirits are restless, and they will not let you go. Leave now, or join us in eternal winter." The realization hit me hard. The curse was not just a local legend, it was a binding spell, a conduit through which the spirits of White Plains sought to claim new souls. Desperation clawed at my sanity as I struggled to find a way to break the curse, to free both myself and the tormented spirits trapped in eternal winter. As I exited the cabin, the snowstorm intensified, the winds howling like the cries of the damned. The shadows converged around me, the whispers now a deafening roar that threatened to consume me. In a final act of defiance, I recited a passage from Eleanor's diary, a desperate attempt to appease the spirits and lift the curse. The air crackled with energy, the snow swirling into a vortex that lifted me off my feet. The world around me dissolved into a blinding white light, and I felt a sense of release wash over me as the spirit's grip loosened. When the light faded, I found myself standing alone in the aftermath of the storm, the snow-covered landscape calm and still. White Plains was silent once more. The curse lifted and the spirits finally at peace. But the memories of what I had endured lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. I left North Dakota soon after, the snowfields of White Plains a ghostly memory etched into my soul. Years later, the legend of White Plains persists, a cautionary tale for those who dare to venture into its cursed expanse. Some still speak of shadowy figures and haunting whispers, but for me, the truth lies in the silent snow and the memories of a winter that never ended. If you ever find yourself traversing the remote snowfields of North Dakota, heed the warnings of those who've walked the cursed paths before you. Respect the land. Honor the spirits that linger. And remember that some legends are born from truths too terrifying to ignore. For in the heart of the endless white, the shadows watch, and the whispers call, waiting for the next soul to fall under their eternal winter spell. Story number 7. The Haunting Sleigh of Frostville. Winter in Scandinavia is a time of stark beauty and relentless chill, where the days are short, and the nights stretch endlessly beneath a blanket of snow. In the remote village of Frostfell, nestled deep within the Scandinavian wilderness, winter was not just a season, it was a presence, an ever-watchful force that shaped the lives of its inhabitants. It was here, in the heart of the frozen expanse, that the legend of the haunting sleigh took root, a tale whispered around hearth fires and carried by the howling winds. I'm Lars Eriksson, a local lumberjack with more stories than years under my belt. Frostfell was all I had ever known, and I'd heard every tale spun by the elders, except the one that began to unfold around me one bitterly cold December in 1901. It started innocently enough. The snow had been falling steadily for weeks, turning the village into a serene, monochromatic landscape. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with ice. Life moved at a slow, measured pace, the villagers accustomed to the demands of winter. But as the first week of December waned, an unsettling unease settled over Frostfell. One evening, as I returned from the forest, axe in hand, I noticed an unusual stillness in the air. The usual crunch of snow underfoot was absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press against my ears. The sky was a deep, inky blue, the stars obscured by thick clouds that hinted at an impending storm. As I approached the outskirts of the village, my breath visible in the frigid air, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A sleigh, unlike any I'd ever seen, gliding silently across the snow. It was ornate, crafted from dark wood and adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer under the weak light. The runners left no tracks, and the horses, sleek and ghostly white, moved with an unnatural grace. A chill swept over me as I watched the sleigh approach, the moonlight reflecting off its polished surface. Then, as swiftly as it had appeared, it vanished into the night, leaving me standing alone in the empty snowfield. My heart pounded in my chest, and a sense of dread settled over me. I hurried back to the village, my mind racing with questions. The next morning, word spread like wildfire. The villagers gathered in the town square, voices hushed and eyes wide with fear. They spoke of the haunting sleigh, a cursed vehicle said to be the vengeful spirit of a hunter named Bjorn, who had met a tragic end years ago. Bjorn was known for his arrogance, boasting that he could outlast the fiercest winter and conquer the wilderness without respect for its ancient spirits. One harsh winter, Bjorn's hubris led him into a deadly blizzard. Lost and disoriented, he succumbed to the elements, his body never found. The villagers believed that in death, his spirit became twisted by anger and resentment, manifesting as the haunting sleigh that now roamed the snow-covered plains each winter, a warning to those who dared to disrespect the land. Despite the warnings, a small group of men, fueled by skepticism and pride, decided to challenge the legend. Among them were Ivar, a brash young hunter eager to prove himself; Henrik, a seasoned woodsman with a deep respect for the old ways; and Johan, the quiet thinker who often mediated disputes within the group. We set out one frigid night, determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting sleigh and put an end to the fear that gripped our village. The journey was treacherous, the snow piling high as we made our way deeper into the wilderness. The wind howled like the spirits of the lost, and the cold was a biting reminder of nature's unforgiving power. As midnight approached, we reached the snowfield where the sleigh had been sighted. The moon was a mere sliver in the sky, providing scant light to guide our way. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and an eerie silence fell over the landscape. Out of the darkness, the haunting sleigh emerged, its presence commanding and otherworldly. The horses stepped forward, their eyes empty voids that seemed to pierce through our very souls. The sleigh moved with deliberate intent, the sound of its silent runners sending shivers down our spines. Ivar, ever the bold one, took a step forward. "Show yourself, spirit. We're not afraid of your curses." A cold laugh echoed through the night. the sound reverberating across the snow. The sleigh halted, and Bjorn's ghostly figure appeared, his face twisted in eternal anger. "You disrespect the land," he intoned, his voice a chilling blend of sorrow and rage. "You seek to challenge the spirits that protect this sacred ground." Henrik stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "We meant no harm. We come with respect, seeking only to understand." Bjorn's spirit laughed again, the sound hollow and haunting. "Respect? Your actions speak louder than your words. You take without giving back. You conquer without reverence. This land does not forgive. It does not forget." As he spoke, the temperature plummeted further, and the snow began to swirl violently around us. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, whispers of lost souls filling the air with their mournful cries. Johann, ever the voice of reason, began to recite an old prayer his mother had taught him, hoping to appease the restless spirit. "Spirits of the land, hear our plea. We seek peace and understanding. Grant us your forgiveness." The wind seemed to respond, swirling in a harmonious rhythm that matched Johann's words. Bjorn's spirit paused, his expression softening slightly. "Perhaps there is hope," he mused, his tone shifting from anger to contemplation. "But remember this, every action has a consequence. Balance must be maintained." With those final words, the haunting sleigh began to fade, the snow calming and the night growing still once more. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and an unspoken agreement that our encounter had changed something fundamental within us. We returned to Frostfell the next morning, the storm having passed and the sun shining brightly on the freshly fallen snow. The villagers greeted us with a mix of relief and curiosity, eager to hear our tale. Ivar, Henrik, and Johann shared their experiences, the reality of the haunting sleigh now undeniable to all who had once doubted. In the weeks that followed, our group dedicated ourselves to restoring balance to Frostfell. We organized community efforts to honor the land, respecting the old traditions and incorporating the wisdom we had gained from our encounter with Bjorn's spirit. The fear that had once gripped our village began to wane, replaced by a renewed sense of unity and respect for the wilderness that surrounded us. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the legend of the haunting sleigh remains a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and nature. Frostfell thrives, the land respected and cherished, the spirits honored and remembered. The tales of Bjorn and his cursed sleigh are now told with a sense of reverence, a lesson learned through courage and humility. Sometimes, on particularly cold nights, I find myself gazing out over the snow-covered plains, the memory of that encounter vivid in my mind. The wind carries the whispers of the past, a gentle reminder that some curses can be lifted through understanding and respect, and that the spirits of the land watch over us, guiding us with their silent presence. If you ever find yourself wandering the remote wilderness of Scandinavia during the dead of winter, heed the lessons of Frostfell, respect the land, honor its spirits, and remember that some legends are born from truths too profound to ignore. For in the heart of the snow and silence lies a story of redemption, a testament to the enduring power of humility and the unbreakable bond between humanity and nature.